Rachel, come quick, he's not moving. Mommy, is Mr. Graham dying? It was past midnight when she found him, slumped beneath the garden lights, breath shallow, skin cold. The wind had turned sharp, but she didn't feel it, only fear. She dropped to her knees, wrapped her arms around him, whispering his name through trembling lips. He didn't answer. Inside the house, everything was still, except for one tiny heartbeat waiting by the window. Then came the question that cracked something deeper than silence. Mommy, are we his family now? And from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same again. Graham Ellis wasn't the kind of man people disturbed. Not anymore. Not since the tabloids named him one of New York's most unreachable CEOs. Not since the press called him a financial visionary with a heart of steel. He had earned his solitude the hard way, by building an empire brick by brick, silence by silence. From the penthouse boardrooms of Tokyo to the gala stages of Manhattan, his name echoed like a brand, powerful, precise, untouchable. But inside his multi-million-dollar mansion, tucked behind black iron gates and manicured hedges, the silence was no longer a choice. It was a sentence. Most nights, Graham didn't bother with wine or music. Instead, he sat on the front steps of his architectural masterpiece, shirt sleeves rolled up, collar loosened, hands resting on his knees like a man waiting for someone who was never coming. He didn't even know what he waited for. He just knew that the silence had stopped feeling peaceful. That was the evening the interruption arrived, wrapped in corduroy sleeves, duct-tape shoes, and a gaze full of unfiltered curiosity. Graham hadn't noticed them at first. The mother, mid-30s, blonde braid tucked under a fraying beanie, coat 2 sizes too thin for the cold. The boy, barely 4, dragging a crumpled plastic bottle behind him like it was a balloon on a string. Their cart squeaked with every step, its rusted wheels struggling under the weight of collected cans and empty glass. They were background noise to a city that had grown numb to struggle. But Eli saw him, not the empire, not the marble steps or tailored slacks. Just the man, alone, unmoving, watching a world that moved without him. And so, with the quiet boldness only a child could carry, Eli stopped, let go of his mother's hand, and crossed the narrow street. Rachel gasped, her heart leaping as she rushed after him. Eli, she hissed, her voice sharp with panic. Come back here now. But the boy had already stopped a few feet from Graham and looked up, head tilted, eyes wide. Can you be my friend? The words didn't come with hesitation. There was no fear, no agenda, no sense of boundaries the world would soon teach him. Just truth. Graham blinked, caught between surprise and confusion. A child? Talking to him? He expected a parent, a fundraiser, someone asking for something. Not this. Rachel caught up a second later, breathless, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I am so sorry, she said quickly, pulling Eli gently back. He talks to people sometimes. I keep telling him not to. He didn't mean to bother you. But Graham's hand rose, slow and steady, as if calming more than the moment. He's not bothering me. It was the first sentence he had spoken out loud in days, maybe weeks, and it startled even him how raw his voice sounded, unused, a little frayed around the edges. Eli peered up at him again, this time with a touch more concern. You look sad, he said with solemn innocence. I thought maybe you needed a friend too. Something shifted inside Graham, not something big or cinematic, more like the softest crack in old stone, a hairline fracture, almost imperceptible, but real. He knelt down slowly so he could meet Eli eye to eye. A friend, huh? He said, attempting a smile that felt foreign on his face. Eli nodded seriously. Friends don't let people sit alone too long. That's what Mommy says. Graham glanced past the boy to Rachel, standing on the curb, torn between pulling her son back and letting him speak. Her posture said, I'm sorry. Her eyes said, don't judge us. He wasn't judging. I didn't know I looked that sad, Graham murmured. Eli shrugged. You do, but it's okay. You can sit with us if you want. We share stuff. Rachel tried again. Eli, come on. But Graham interrupted gently, voice softer this time. Almost warm. Would you both like a cookie? Rachel blinked. Cookie? I baked too many, Graham said with a faint chuckle, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't like eating alone. For the first time, Eli's face lit up like a spark had ignited inside him. I love cookies. See? Rachel hesitated, her eyes flicking from Graham's sincere expression to the tall hedges that separated this reality from their own. Everything about this felt like a line they weren't meant to cross. But Eli was already looking up at her with that pleading, hopeful gleam only 4-year-olds can conjure. So she nodded, just once. Okay, just for a minute. Graham stood and opened the door. For a moment he hesitated, hand on the handle, wondering what exactly he was inviting in. But as Eli skipped up the steps and Rachel followed cautiously behind, something stirred in Graham Ellis's chest. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real, and it all started with a cookie and a question. The kitchen looked like something out of a magazine. Pristine granite countertops gleamed under soft pendant lights. Sleek stainless steel appliances reflected back the room's every perfect edge. No clutter, no smudges, no life. It was a kitchen designed to be admired, not used. But that day it held something it hadn't in years. Crumbs. Eli sat on a bar stool far too tall for him, kicking his heels as he devoured a cookie with the giddy satisfaction only a 4-year-old could muster. His cheeks were dusted with sugar. A soft hum escaped his lips between bites, a tune no one recognized but one Graham Ellis would later realize he missed when it was gone. Rachel stood by the door, uncertain. Her coat was fraying at the sleeves, and the damp air clung to her like the weight of everything she carried. Her eyes scanned the space, not in admiration, but in calculation, assessing exit points, estimating how long politeness allowed her to stay. You can sit if you'd like, Graham offered gently, gesturing toward the stool next to her son. She gave a small, polite smile. Thank you, she said, but remained standing. Instead, she stepped forward only to reach for a crumpled napkin from her coat pocket, gently dabbing Eli's mouth, then folding another beneath his cookie to catch crumbs before they hit the counter. The motion was practiced, quiet, intimate, the kind of small act that speaks volumes when no one else is watching. That became their rhythm, a knock, a cookie, a moment of warmth in a house that hadn't held it for years. Sometimes they stayed 10 minutes, sometimes 20, always cautious, never imposing. Rachel never asked for anything. Eli never left without saying thank you. Graham, in turn, found himself doing something he hadn't in ages, baking. Not for show or networking or charity events. Just to see Eli's face light up, he began researching new recipes. Stocked cinnamon for Eli, bought chamomile and jasmine tea without ever being asked. He'd sit in his home office and wonder, would snickerdoodles be too sweet? Or does Rachel prefer soft-baked or crisp? He never asked aloud, and she never answered, but her silence carried a softness now. Less guarded, more present. Then one evening, curiosity got the better of him. When Rachel and Eli left with their usual wave and thank you, Graham grabbed his coat and slipped out the back gate, keeping a careful distance as he followed them through side streets and alleyways he'd never walked. What he saw humbled him. Rachel knelt by a recycling bin, separating bottles with methodical care. She rinsed a yogurt container at the corner sink behind a bakery, thanking the shopkeeper with a quiet nod. She broke her sandwich in half to share with an elderly man huddled near a grate, then coaxed Eli to eat the rest, while smiling as if this were just another day in their adventure. Eli trailed beside her with an old canvas tote strapped over his shoulder like a messenger bag. When strangers passed, he bowed his head slightly and smiled, a gesture that felt rehearsed, taut, and heartbreakingly mature for someone so small. That night, back in his immaculate kitchen, Graham stood still for a long time. He stared at the cookie jar, at the clean mug Rachel had used, at the stool Eli claimed as if it were his throne. Something inside him tightened. The next day when Rachel arrived, Graham offered oatmeal raisin cookies. Eli bit in gleefully and declared it the best day ever. After a long pause, as Rachel folded napkins into quarters, Graham finally asked, "What did you do before all this?" Rachel looked up, unsure at first if she should answer. Then her shoulders relaxed. "I was a chef," she said simply. Graham blinked. A chef? She nodded. Head of the kitchen at a place called the Harvest Table, before it was bought out. He stared, recognition dawning. You were the Rachel Monroe? The one who designed their seasonal menu? Local farm to table? Rachel smiled faintly. Back before I married the wrong man. What happened? Her gaze dropped for a moment. He talked me into signing paperwork I didn't fully read. I thought we were building something together. Turned out I was liable for all his debt. He disappeared. The restaurant was sold. My name was blacklisted. In 6 weeks, I lost everything. She said it like fact. Not with bitterness. Not even sadness. Just truth. I tried waitressing after, but no one wants to hire the person who used to run the place. It makes them nervous or resentful. Her hand rested instinctively on Eli's back. I didn't lose everything, though, she added softly. I still have him. Graham looked at her, really looked, not at her coat or her shoes or her posture, but at the calm strength behind her words, the pride in how she mothered, even when the world stopped giving. She wasn't broken. She was rebuilding, and for the first time in years, Graham didn't see someone seeking help. He saw someone who'd once led others and could again. Someone with grit, grace, grit wrapped in grace. That night, he baked a second batch of cookies, these ones chocolate chip. He left 3 on a plate next to a note, just in case they came tomorrow. And for the first time since he built his empire, he hoped someone would knock. The first time Graham asked Rachel for help in the kitchen, he almost whispered it, like asking for kindness in a language he had forgotten how to speak. They had just finished another quiet afternoon. Eli was licking the last crumbs from a peanut butter cookie, while Rachel tidied the counter with her usual graceful efficiency. Graham stood by the stove, staring down at a pot of water as if waiting for it to teach him something. I want to learn, he said. Rachel turned, surprised. Learn what? He rubbed the back of his neck. How to make something real, not from a box, not microwaved, something warm, something that doesn't taste like nothing. She hesitated, studying his face. It wasn't pride speaking, it was humility. I can show you something simple, she offered. A base, something we used to make at the restaurant on slow nights. And so it began. Twice a week, Rachel came a little earlier than usual, while Eli played at the kitchen island with measuring spoons and stacked metal cups into makeshift castles. Graham and Rachel stood side by side at the counter, learning to build something from scratch. Rachel moved with quiet confidence, her hands familiar with every motion. She taught him the rhythm of the knife, how to dice an onion finely without crying, how to crush garlic with the side of a blade. She explained how heat wasn't just about temperature, it was about timing, emotion, intuition. Graham listened, sometimes asked questions, sometimes didn't, but he remembered it all. Start with a sofrito, Rachel said one afternoon, gently stirring a pot. Onions, garlic, carrots, celery. Let them sweat, not brown. This is your foundation. What's it for? Graham asked. Everything, she replied. Soups, sauces, survival. The scent of sizzling garlic filled the air, mingling with the quiet crackle of the stovetop and Eli's happy humming from the table. He was always drawing, same scene every time. 3 stick figures at a table, one tall, one with long yellow scribbled hair, one small with wide smiles, and always a dog, brown and floppy, in the corner. We don't have a dog, Graham said with a laugh one day. Eli, without missing a beat, replied, Not yet. Rachel chuckled softly, rinsing lentils in the sink. There was something healing in those afternoons. The soup pot simmered like a beating heart at the center of the home, and the kitchen, once cold and clinical, began to transform. Little things started to shift. The fridge slowly filled, not with brand-name bottles or pre-prepped meals, but with jars of leftovers labeled in Rachel's handwriting. Broths, pickled vegetables, a small tub of homemade tomato paste. Graham's spice rack, once decorative, became active. He learned to toast cumin, to fold in parsley instead of chopping it aggressively. He learned that cooking didn't require perfection, it required presence. I used to rush everything, Graham admitted as he overstirred a pot. Rachel gently took the spoon from his hand. Good food isn't fast, it waits for you. just like people do. That night they made a lentil stew, simple, earthy, seasoned with turmeric, lemon, and a hint of cinnamon. Rachel called it a Monday soup, the kind you could stretch over 3 meals, maybe 4. It was the first time Graham went back for seconds. After dinner, as they cleared the table, Rachel stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, humming something under her breath. Eli colored in the corner, and Graham watched them both. Not as guests, but as something else entirely. Maybe it was the steam rising from the pot. Maybe it was the way Rachel adjusted Eli's sweater without him noticing. Maybe it was how full the silence had become. No longer cold, no longer hollow. That night, Graham placed Eli's newest drawing on the fridge with a sun-shaped magnet. He stared at it for a long time. 3 people at a table, a dog in the corner, the pot in the center. And for the first time in his adult life, Graham Ellis realized something remarkable. He wasn't just learning to cook, he was learning to care. By early fall, the city knew the name Rachel's Honest Spoon. It was printed in neat white letters on the side of a freshly restored sage green food cart that had once been rusting in a warehouse lot. Now it gleamed with purpose. Beneath the name hung a hand-drawn logo, a crooked wooden spoon, sketched by a certain 4-year-old with a serious love for crayons and soup. Graham Ellis had handled the logistics, permits, sourcing the cart, connections with vendors, but he never took credit. When Rachel tried to thank him, he'd simply say, "You're the chef. I'm just making sure the kitchen has wheels." And she was. Every morning, Rachel arrived before dawn, her hair tied loosely, apron folded under one arm, thermos of tea in the other. Her menu was short and honest, just like her cart. Lentil and rice stew, chickpea curry, herbed focaccia, a rotating cookie special, no fancy garnishes, no pretentious flair. And people came, construction workers, nurses ending night shifts, office assistants, and soon foodies whispering on local forums, praising the cart with words like soulful, comforting, and healing. Graham, never far, quietly helped behind the scenes, refilling water tanks, restocking ingredients, fixing the cash drawer when it jammed. He never wore a suit around the cart, just rolled up sleeves and a subtle smile. Eli had claimed a tiny corner near the napkins as his post. He handed out cookies like a maitre d' at a 5-star restaurant and proudly announced the specials with a dramatic flair Rachel never taught him. It was life, beautifully chaotic, a little messy, and entirely theirs. One golden September afternoon, they took a rare break. A local park buzzed with weekend energy, families on picnic blankets, kids chasing bubbles, dogs barking, leaves beginning to crisp at the edges. Graham spread out a blanket beneath a sprawling oak, while Rachel unpacked a small basket of sandwiches and lemonade. Eli darted off toward the playground with his usual enthusiasm, his blue backpack bouncing behind him. Rachel sat beside Graham, shoulders brushing gently, her body finally relaxed in a way it hadn't been in years. "You ever think we'd end up here?" she asked quietly, sipping her drink. Graham chuckled. "I wasn't even supposed to open the door that day." "You almost didn't," she teased. He looked at her then, not just at her face, but at the woman she had become again. Not the tired, guarded version who once stood in his kitchen, unsure if she belonged, but the one who now ran her own business, who laughed more easily, who had taken up space in his life with grace and honesty. A little while later, Eli came bounding back, cheeks flushed and hands sticky. "I'm hungry," he declared dramatically. "I smell dessert." Graham reached into the basket. "Well, lucky for you." He pulled out 3 cupcakes, frosted simply, one of them with a tiny sugar star on top. Eli claimed the star-topped one instantly and took a giant bite. Half a second later, he froze. "Mommy," he mumbled, fishing something from his mouth. "There's something in this." Rachel turned quickly, alarmed. "What?" But when Eli held it up between 2 fingers, time slowed. A thin silver ring, delicate, a single sapphire at its center. Rachel's eyes widened. Graham had already shifted onto one knee. "No big speech," he said quietly. "No grand gesture." Rachel stared at him, breath caught in her chest. "I don't want to save you. I don't want to fix you. I just..." Want to be where you are, with both of you. Eli looked between them, wide-eyed, then whispered, "Say yes, Mommy. He's already in our picture." Rachel laughed through her tears, covering her mouth, the ring now trembling in her palm. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." Graham reached for her hand, slipped the ring on gently, then pulled her and Eli into an embrace that felt like the end of a storm. Underneath the oak tree, the three of them stayed tangled in laughter and limbs and cupcake crumbs. Around them, the city kept spinning. Bikes sped by, music played faintly in the distance. A dog barked near the fountain. But for Graham Ellis, who once sat alone on his marble steps with no one to talk to, this was the only moment that ever mattered. And for Rachel, who once lost everything she built, this was her second beginning. And for Eli, well, he finally got the answer he'd always believed in. They were already a family. Sometimes life doesn't change with a bang. It shifts quietly, like a knock at the door, like a child's voice asking a simple question, like a bowl of soup placed in front of someone who forgot what warmth feels like. Graham Ellis had lived in a fortress of success. He had built walls of marble and steel, of numbers and accolades. But not even the highest walls can keep out loneliness when it creeps in quietly, filling rooms with silence, not sound. He never knew that healing wouldn't come from another investment, another award, or another zero on a paycheck. It came from a child with wide eyes, duct-taped shoes, and no sense of social lines. "Can you be my friend?" That sentence wasn't the beginning of a friendship. It was the unraveling of a man's isolation. It was the first stitch in a new kind of family. Rachel, too, never asked for sympathy. She didn't need saving. She needed space to rebuild. She needed someone to see not what she had lost, but what she was still capable of creating. She didn't arrive in Graham's life with demands. She came with napkins tucked into coat pockets and instincts sharpened by survival. She taught with her actions, folding a towel just right, seasoning soup with care, showing how presence could be louder than praise. A mother's love doesn't ask for pity. It builds from scratch, ingredient by ingredient, meal by meal, moment by moment. And in her own quiet way, Rachel gave Graham something he never expected: permission to soften, to laugh, to kneel, to hope again. And then there was Eli, a child too young to understand status, too pure to hide his heart. He never saw a CEO. He saw a man who looked lonely, and that was enough reason to speak. Eli's innocence didn't just open a door, it cracked open a heart. His crayon drawings, his humming, his quiet wisdom disguised as childish honesty. They painted a picture that no adult had dared to imagine. A man who once sat alone now had a seat at a table he never thought he deserved. A woman who once lost everything now ran her own kitchen under her own name. And a boy who once asked for a friend got a father instead. This story reminds us a friend can arrive in the most unexpected form, not through grand gestures, but through shared cookies, quiet dinners, and conversations held over a simmering pot of soup. A mother's love isn't always loud. It shows up in the small things, in folded clothes, in warm meals, in the unshakable grace of a woman determined not to give up. And most of all, a child's honest voice can rebuild even the most broken soul. Because love doesn't always come from romance. Family doesn't always come from blood. Sometimes it begins with a question, a look, a knock on the door, and the willingness to answer. In a world that often rushes past quiet miracles, this was one that stopped time. And from that moment on, they never had to eat alone again. Sometimes we're so busy chasing success that we forget what it means to be seen, to be truly known. But as this story reminds us, connection isn't about status, it's about presence. In today's fast-paced world, filled with smartphones and social media, it's easy to overlook the quiet needs around us. A neighbor sitting alone on their porch, a single mom at the grocery store, counting pennies, a child who just wants someone to listen. And yet, what if healing begins not in big actions, but in small, simple moments? A warm meal, an honest conversation, a child's drawing on the fridge. We hope this story touched something in your heart, because in the end, we're all a little like Graham, Rachel, or Eli, searching for home in our own way. What about you? Have you ever had a stranger change your life in an unexpected way? Do you believe that family can be chosen, not just inherited? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories, your memories, or even your questions. And if this story reminded you of someone, send it to them. Let them know they're not alone. Thank you for spending time with us here on Warm Soul Stories. If you believe the world could use more kindness, more healing, and more hope, click like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a story that just might change your day. Until next time, stay warm and never underestimate the power of a shared cookie.